Amy said we were going to wing it. We could, but I do have like 127 PowerPoint slides that if you're more interested in seeing, we could do that. Yeah, okay. All right, so let's prove it. But first, before we prove it, can we talk about the problem that we're going to solve? I don't really want Amy to have to ask any questions when she comes back up, so let's clearly define the problem. Where are my operations people in the room? Operations people, there's only 4 operations people, 5, 6. Do you have a problem with collecting data, or do you have data everywhere? Everywhere. What's your problem? You've got data everywhere. You've got transactional records spread across 6, 7, 8 different databases. You've got time series data stored in a historian, or 2, or 3. Do you want to do things with that data so you can drive better decision making and provide information and insights to your people? Yes. And you're doing it on paper. You're doing it in Excel workbooks. You're doing it across multiple applications where you have no governance whatsoever. You're calculating the same KPIs 3 different places, and you have 3 different answers, and none of them are right. Am I wrong? If somebody opens up a certain Excel workbook and does something wrong, it could bring down your plant. Well, at least the reporting on your plant. We're going to show you how we can solve that problem for you, and we're going to let you pick your use case. See, it's tough if I start showing you that Flow has a dashboard and we can do OEE, because then you put us in a little hole and say, oh, you're an OEE tool. Or if I show you a production report, then all of a sudden now, well, I've already got that. We already do production. Now, Flow is a tool that you use to take what you need to solve by bringing data from multiple data sources into one unified view, slice it, dice it, govern it, and share it. So when we engage in a pilot with a customer, and I'm going to ask you at the end of this presentation to engage in a pilot with us, when we engage with a pilot, it's a $20,000 process. We go for a 3 to 4 week engagement with the customer. We pick a few of those use cases that they want to solve by taking the data that they've got spread across their plant, and we bring it together in one place. They walk out of the pilot with a license that is a perpetual license, and we spend about 60, usually it's 80, hours of our time building it, showing you how we build it, and then getting feedback from you to see if we're ready to go to the next step. So after we wing it, I'm going to throw this back up with a QR code. We're going to do 5 pilots in Q2. We've booked 1 on the first day of the show, so thank you to the show. And we've got 4 more left. So if you're ready to add some value on the plant floor without cloud necessities, we don't need the internet. We don't need to go out. We can do it right on the plant floor. Let's show you how. You ready? All right. Lenny, what use case are you going to build today?
Okay, so Jeff, just before I build this use case, promise me 2 things. You're going to not interrupt me, and you're going to let me focus. All right, so let's pick production forecasting as an example. All right, so what are we going to do? Let's connect to the broker. But when I'm going to connect to the broker, I'm going to connect to the raw data that's been published to that broker. So let's connect and let's look at the presses as an example. I've only subscribed to the topic for the presses that's giving me the unstructured raw data. So if I look at press 103 as an example, and I look at the raw data that's being pushed, I can see there's a whole bunch of machine data there. I see the actual diameter of the film that's going through the press. I can see what is the length that's been run through that piece of equipment. This is quite interesting. So there's already some kind of conversion happening on that machine. It's telling me how many units have I actually pressed. There's a big number there, I don't know, 8,639. What does that mean?
I don't think we know what it means.
We don't know. Why don't we know?
What's missing? Yeah, it's
Say
just
again?
raw data.
Contextualization. As Arlen said, contextualization can happen at the edge. It can be a simple thing as a unit of measure, or it can be a little bit more complex. All right, so we're going to add some context to that, only that one point. From all of the data that's being pushed to this MQTT broker, we're just going to focus on that one point, and we're going to add as many contexts as we can to that one point. All right. There's another piece of data that we're going to connect to, which is an MES database where all my work order information is living, all my product information is living, and let's see if we can actually stitch these two together.
All right, but you better get going.
I know. All right. So,
22 minutes.
I'm in our environment, our engineering environment. I'm quickly going to show you guys that I am connecting to the proved UNS. So we are actually historizing all of that real-time data that's getting pushed by that machine. And I can go and now look for that counter converter tag for line 3. So let's have a look. There we go. Let's just quickly have a look at that data. Perfect. I've got the history of that data. That is showing me two things. It's showing me that that value that got pushed to the UNS is actually a counter tag. What do I mean by that? As the batch goes through the process, it's counting how many pieces going down, and then it resets back to 0, and then it starts again as the new work order, the new batch goes in. Okay, so that's one piece of data that I've got. Other piece of data that I've connected to is the MES database. All right. Now, I'm browsing a namespace for that MES, but you'll notice one thing. I'm not browsing tables. It's a MySQL database at the end, at the back end, but when I browse it, it actually browses like a namespace of a historian. So I can see all the operations, all the lines, I can see all the presses. There's actually 5 presses in that MES database. And if I look at press number 3, there's all the points that I'm actually interested in. I'm interested in what was the product, what is the work order, and what is the state of that machine. Now, Walker said there's no such thing as low code, no code, and he's right. How did we actually get for this tool to actually browse that and create this kind of namespace browsing capability? I need to understand the schema of that database, and yes, I had to build a definition and code a definition to actually browse it in, and then generate the SQL queries for me automatically at the back end.
But once that's done, which is one of the things we do on our pilot, is we establish that definition file to match the schema of your database, so that now any engineer that uses this tool is literally going into your MES database, grabbing the data that they need represented like a tag, and just dragging it over and bringing it in to start modeling it. It's really that easy. From this point on, you won't see us write code, you won't see us write script.
All right, so I'm picking the raw data points that I want from the MES, and I'm also picking the raw data point from the time series data. Bring that in. Let's give it a nice normalized name. So this is going to be my unit counter. And I am done working with my data sources. I'm actually going to just close it up completely.
So one thing I know about my dear friend and partner Lenny is that he cannot talk and type. You will get 87 spelling errors if he tries to do both of these things. So I'm going to narrate as he starts to build. Do you see the column to the right of his model that has a folder at the top, a lightning bolt, and a metric? This is what we use to drag elements into our model. So folder structure is completely dynamic. Make it as flat or as deep as you would like. Anything that is a child of a parent will inherit any of the context that you have added to the parent. Below that is an event. An event is just simply a definition that has a start trigger and an end trigger. You can use tags, you can use expressions, you can use complex logic, you can use calendar time, you can use other events, all as your triggers for your events. Now, he brought the tags over from MES and from the historian. I want to make sure you understand that we leave all of the original data where it was originally stored. We don't replicate raw data. Why would we? It's already stored, it's already validated, it's already trusted. Instead, we keep an active link to where that is. And that means over time, you might change databases, you might go to a different historian provider, we can point to the old archive, we can point to the new archive and link tags together. What we need with our events is more than just a start time and a stop time. We need duration, but we need context. We want to know what the engineer knows, what the operator knows, what the plant floor knows about these events. So we contextualize events by bringing in additional metadata and attributes. So for a batch run, what might we have in the MES that we want to contextualize with? We're probably going to want to use product and work order. When he's ready to deploy, we are doing something very different than what you've seen from stage so far this week. Flow is a backfill specialist. You have history. You just created a model, Lenny. Do we want to backfill and get the history? Of course we do. And we want to be able to do this over and over again so that as we take our model and extend it, make corrections along the way, if we have 10 years of history, we want 10 years of data. And that's exactly what the backfill does. And just like that, what do you have, Lenny?
All right, so what have I done? I've created a counter retrieval that's going to go and contextualize my counter data for every hour. I'm also going to look in that MES database and slice that hour per the product that I'm manufacturing, and I'm going to add that as context to the throughput metric. So I've got two things. I know now what is the total per hour that I'm producing. I also know how that is sliced between the two different work orders that I'm running on that line. Okay. If that work order changed halfway through the hour, we will slice it and we'll add the correct context for those pieces of time that we're slicing through that. And the way that we do that is by creating an event that tracks my schedule, when that schedule starts and stops. It associates the correct work order details from the MES data, and we slice it and add context to it from the counter data from that time series database that we've been historizing. Cool.
So that's now a piece of insight with data that came out of MES, with data that came out of the historian, and we sliced the historian by the transaction in the MES, and then we took additional MES data and contextualized the event with it. Now, that's great, Lenny. Theoretically, I can see it's in the model, but we're supposed to visualize.
Yes.
Can you build something in a minute and a half?
All right, so let's go back to my configuration explorer. Again,
you're not supposed to talk. You got to go fast.
I'm sorry. All right, so I'm just going to create a very simple table. We've got an event-based table to visualize all of our events. So let's just open that up quickly.
We don't expect you to use Flow's dashboards for all of your visualization. Please, if you have ignition, come on, it's perspective. Let us feed that data to perspective. Let us feed any of the data that's in Flow's database, what we have now stored, to whatever visualization is already your single pane of glass. But if you don't have an easy way to quickly visualize data, or if you just want to use it to validate it before you move on, look, our dashboarding tool allows you to take things like events and very quickly build out a table of all of the events that we've just backfilled with the work order number, with the product, with the start and stop, with the production count for each of them.
All right, so I can see my past 10 days worth of work orders here. I can see when they started, when they stopped, and then obviously how many units came off that press for that entire work order run. And we can obviously have done this for every hour as well, but this just gives us that total for the entire work order run as well. Now, we need to share this back. This structured data, we can now share back to the UNS as well. All right. Let's have a look at how that works. So instead of connecting to the unstructured data, I'm just going to disconnect here, and I'm going to connect to my topic that I've been pushing out. We've been doing this for the duration of the show as well. So if I now look under the presses, under my flow topic that I'm pushing, I'm now pushing contextualized production information, and I've added a few more KPIs so you guys can just get an idea. I've added a KPI that tells me what is my 7-hour moving average of production. I'm adding context about what is my total month-to-date production total. I'm adding context to show what is my day-to-day production context. Let's have a look at that.
And Lenny, just before you go through, I want to share that on his laptop also is the model that we had built coming into this show as part of our pilot. And in that model, we have asked the customer to give us as much information as they think is relevant about the different parts of that data model. So you're going to see that context also coming in with the insight, with the KPI, with the event.
All right, so let's have a look here. I've got the description of that KPI. So in this case, I am doing a predicted regression analysis to figure out what is the next hour's production going to be, because I've got history. Right. So potentially for the next hour, I might be able to make 7,819 pieces out of this press. When will this update? It will update every hour onto the UNS. So we will report when that value change on exception, we'll report that new value going into the UNS. There's some metadata that I've added to it. We can see what type of drying system this type of press is utilizing. I can see the manufacturer. I can see what the max speed or rated max speed is that this machine is set up with. I can see the maximum width of what it can do, the serial number. I can see who's the subject matter expert, who I need to phone if I need to get some information about this machine, and who's the vendor that's actually making it. But one thing that we need is, what about all the historical data that we've now been capturing?
Now, hold on a second.
Okay.
What do you mean? Isn't the UNS where I go to get everything?
It is, but it's going to give you the current state of that value on the broker.
Right, so 7,890.
Exactly. What if you now want to go and look at the history of that KPI? How do you, if you want to go and see, am I actually increasing my production, reducing my production? You need the history to see that as well.
But I can't pass history through the UNS.
There's ways, but yes, there's no way that I can now query something back to get the history in the UNS. So what do? We provide a link for two things. We provide a link for the model that you've just created within Flow. That model will tell me, and I'll show you guys what it does. It will tell me the configuration of that KPI. It tells me how this KPI was constructed and what is the dependence of that KPI, so that I can go through that entire model tree to get to the source data that I've used to create that piece of information. I also give you an API that will give you the history of that KPI. All right, and that history can be the already contextualized data that we store within Flow, or I can pass through the raw data from the underlying historian or SQL database through one endpoint in one structure and standard. Okay.
Did everybody hear that? I just want to say it again. If Flow is connected to a data source, think about your LIMS system, your MES, maybe an ERP, staging database you have access to, a historian, maybe it's maybe it's a CMMS. If Flow has an active connection to it and you have modeled those tags in Flow, Flow's single endpoint REST API is available for you to query it and ask for Flow to go get the raw data for you from those other connected data sources, package it together based on your start period and end period, and hand it off in one JSON payload. So if I have a connection to my UNS, I can get the last known value, but I can also get all the instructions that I need as a citizen developer to be able to connect and request raw data from the underlying data sources without having to know how to interact with that historian or to write a SQL query. Will you show us how?
Right, so I've got Postman. Postman is connected to my API server. I'm feeding in the ID for that particular measure. Each measure in the Flow system has a unique identifier, and if I go and request the model for that particular KPI, it will go and give me all of the information that we've got in the model as we define it within Flow. I've got, obviously, the name. I've got the unit of measure of that piece. in the model. I've got the description of it. When will it update? It is calculated. So what does that mean? That means it is calculated in the model from other pieces of information. It will tell me all the metadata fields that's associated with it in the model. On which line does it run? What part of the enterprise does it belong? Which site does it belong to? Which process does it belong to? And all of this metadata is important because if I want to go and slice and dice in another tool or in a business intelligence kind of solution, I've got all of these slices now that I can apply to that. I know the serial number, the manufacturer, the max speed, so it's all the same data that we kind of push to the UNS. I've got the access to all of that data through the API as well. What's cool that I quickly want to highlight here is that
wait, go back for me. I'm sorry. Just up a little. Keep going. What's that?
All right, so we also publish all the different states that the machine can be in as a little bit more context.
You know what I call that? I call that the Jonathan Wise special. Jonathan, are you in the room? Jonathan's not in the room. Jonathan posted on LinkedIn before he came. He just wanted a vendor to show up and let him know what all of the potential states are. Don't tell me it's a state of one. Tell me what else it could be. So that was for Jonathan.
Okay, cool. All right. Now, part of the metadata is that we will tell you that this is the type of this KPI is a calculation. And look here, we're telling you what are we using or what is the calculation in the back end. We're using a function, a line fit regression function. We're passing in 7 points, and we're passing the past 7 points of hourly production to work it out. Where do we get it? Well, we get it from dependent number 304. Oh, that's cool. So if I go and slot in dependent 304 in here, and I execute the API, it's going to show me that, oh, yes, it's dependent on the units per hour. We give you the same information for that, or what's defined as the metadata for that KPI, and if I slowly scroll down, it will now show me that where did I get this guy from? Well, I got it from a tag. So that's the raw data. That's the raw data that we collected from either the historian or from that MES database. And guess what? If I use that ID, I can actually get that raw data. Okay. Let's do that quickly. So let's go into the tags, and let's go and ask for the raw data. And this was for, sorry about that, 295. So if I change that component there to 295, that will go and browse, do the pass-through, and give me the raw data for that tag in a structured JSON. And I've got the start, the end, the quality, the value, and the duration of that as an array of data points. And that's the same if I'm querying it from a historian as if I'm querying it from a database. This structure of how we pass the data through is all standard. Okay. Now, we have one facility here, and we focused on one point, and we created about, I don't know, 10 different KPIs from that one point that we are now connected to from the UNS. What if I've got 10 facilities, and I've got 10 presses? Are you expecting me to drag all of these things by hand and build out all of these things? No, because then you're losing your governance. Because I want to be able to benchmark between all of these different presses that I have. I want to see how do they compare. Is there a press that's not performing the way that it should? So we've got the concept of templates, where I can go and templatize a press, and I can go and create all of the different KPIs that I need. So I'm creating an information model about how do I want to monitor this press. Now, I can then go and instantiate that press 3 times, or how many presses I actually have, and it will utilize the exact same calculations. Now, you're probably going to tell me, and you're going to say, that's not the real world. Where did you see 3 presses being exactly the same on a manufacturing environment?
That's the problem with templates, right? Is they're great, but maybe in a greenfield application for a day and a half. Or what happens when I deploy a template and then I've got an engineer that really likes to break stuff, and they go in and they mess around with the template and they create their own measures and metrics and events.
So let's have a look at the unstructured 3 presses that we have on the UNS. And Walker said he did make it difficult for the vendors, and he sure did. If we look at press number 3, this is the one that we utilized. We can see I've got this unit counter tag here. And if I look at press number 5, it's missing. It's not there. So now what? Okay. What we can do in Flow is we can say, I can go and extend, or I can actually change the actual instance of that template within my information model. The tag that I'm utilizing to build that throughput was automatically calculated from the tag, right? So I pulled it from the historian. What I can now do for press 5 is I can say, well, I'm actually not going to get that value. It's not there. So I'm going to change the way that I am retrieving the data for that piece of equipment. And the way that I do that is I can say, you know what? I'm actually not retrieved from a data source anymore. I need the operator to manually enter that data point for me. What does it allow me to do? It allows me now to get data from different places, but I'm applying the same information model and creating the same KPIs at the end of the day from that. Doesn't matter where it's coming from. So I can create a manual entered form for the operator. I can set the value 0 or null, so I'm forcing him to actually type it in, else the calculation is not going to work. And I can give him that front end for him to actually tell me at the end of the day or the end of the shift, this is the actual units that I've actually created. What I'm going to push to the UNS as a structure, you're not going to know the difference. If I go back and connect to the contents or the model that we're pushing, between press 105 and press 103, you're getting the exact same information model back.
This is a really good day for me because Lenny doesn't know it, but this is the first time in 2.5 years of working with him where I realized he just made a mistake. Uh-huh. You are going to know it. You know how you're going to know it? You want to correct your mistake?
It's fine. You can.
Because you could use that URL endpoint for that model, and you would be able to see when you got down to the tag level that it's not retrieved from a data source. You would be able to see that it was manually entered because that's how it would be coded. Am I right?
You're right.
Okay. Round of applause. I only get this once in a decade.
Cool. Last thing that I want to tell is that I can now even use that template for the data scientists and the guys out there is to actually mass get all of that data from the instances back. So instead of adding the ID for each and every one of my presses, I can actually go and say, you know what? I would like to get all the data for all the schedules or for all the presses that's been instantiated by this template. I want to go and get all of that data by specifying just from which template did I derive it from. So if I go and hit that from the API, I say I want to get it from template ID number 5. If I hit this on the API, instead of just giving it for me for the one press, you'll notice that I've got data for press number 3. I can see all the schedules that it's coming from the MES system. I can see when that schedule was started or scheduled to start and stop, what the schedule type. It's a manual schedule. This is the product that was supposed to be running. It's still the original version. So if someone changed that schedule, we will go and rerun it, recalculate it, tell you that there's a change that happened. But I'm getting this now for each and every press by one API call because I'm using the template to pass that information through.
Awesome.
So it will give me press 1, press 4, and press 5.
All right, so I promised that I was going to give you, if you like what we're offering and you think it would add value to you, pull your phone out, scan the QR. I can't promise that we will engage, but we will absolutely take a meeting and we will check for fit, okay? we will check for fit. If you think that you need more than that, I would ask for you to please hit me out at the booth, and we can discuss those needs. Final thing, Amy's getting ready to kick me off. I don't want you to think that the only thing we publish to is an MQTT broker. So Flow's publishing engine will also write the same information that you saw us sending to the MQTT broker to your cloud providers, to other SQL databases, to Teams, to Slack, to email. Just tell us where you want the information to go, and we'll deliver it there. All right, Lenny, great job. Amy, thank you. And also, finally, a thank you to our partners who are in the room. Thank you, partners.
All right, can we get that QR code up? And maybe I missed it. Can you guys remind me really quick, how long did it take you to build this? How much did it cost?
Yeah. So based on what you saw, if Lenny's building it, and either he or his team is who shows up to help you with the pilot or to run the pilot, Lenny, you could build what we just did in 3 days?
Yes.
Not what we just did, what we're publishing, the full model, yep. 3 days. And our typical pilot is $20,000. If you wanted to go full-blown Flow, no limits whatsoever for a site, it's a subscription. It's $14,000 to $15,000 a year.
Awesome, thank you. So while people are still putting in questions, we're going to ask you the question that we ask every presenter. Everything that you guys just did, let's say you couldn't use Flow software. How would you go about it, and explain why your approach is better?
Yeah. So we would do it the same way that you've been struggling to do it for the last 20 years. You would build up a SQL database. You would ingest a ton of data that you had to connect and understand how to connect to those things. You're going to write a ton of code to try to normalize timestamps, to align for calculations, to look up last known values and handle boundary values. Every single time the data changes on the plant floor or gets incorrectly coded, you're going to have to go back and rerun all of that work. And then you're going to have to figure out where you're going to visualize it and how you're going to get out of the SQL database into that visualization tool. And when you're successful and do it at that one little site area or that one cell, then you got to figure out how to take that product and go do it the whole way across the plant.
Don't forget backfilling the data, looking for the changes, keeping the dependency tree for all the calcs in check. So yes, there's quite a lot in the back end happening to make that work.
Yeah.
All right. So these questions are a little similar, so I'll put them together. How can you compare to PyAsset Framework, and also how are you different from Seek?
Yeah. May I?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so if you're super familiar with PyAsset Framework, think about Flow as being Asset Framework completely decoupled from a PyArchive. I can do what I'm doing in Asset Framework, I just don't have to have a Py license everywhere. Plus, I think what you saw from Lenny is that where AF is definitely a knowledge base you really have to step into, with a little bit of training, if you have someone on your plant floor who's good with Excel, they're going to learn Flow pretty quick. It's dragging things around. Seek is a very powerful final stage analytics tool, but to my knowledge, all the work that I do in Seek kind of just lives in Seek. I've now got to govern that work in Seek, and I'm not sharing that out with every other application across my floor.
All right.
Oh, and it's not $190,000 a year.
Awesome.
That too.
That too. All right, another question. So does this mean that you're actually storing your data twice? It's raw and contextualized?
No. All right, so do we have a time series historian? Yes. Probably heard about Timebase as you walked past our booth. So if there's no historian in place, we will promote Timebase to get that time series data historized. If I'm connecting to an Avivo historian, I'm not duplicating that raw data within Flow nor within Timebase. It stays at source. Am I storing the contextualized data? Yes, I am. So the contextualized result of the aggregate or the KPI that we are running, we are storing that in a database. Why do we do that? Well, if you then report on it or pull it through the API, it's already contextualized and it's already stored. and it's already calculated. I don't have to run the calculation again on the raw data for me to actually deliver it to the other applications. But we do not reduplicate raw data from source.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Well, Lenny, you seem to know a lot about historians. So can you describe when it makes sense to use a time series database versus a historian?
Can we take that one at the booth? Because
All right.
it's a long debate, Mark. I know that's you. Where's Mark? Let's take it to the booth.
All right. Let's see. What else do we got? Is the editor also for non-Windows, or is this Windows exclusive?
All right, so the editor, so the tool that you saw me use to drag and drop, yes, that is a Windows thick client at this point in time. The components to execute, so the engines that lives in the back end to execute, to create the context, to pull off the magic together, that I can run in Docker. The Flow server, which is the visualization piece where I go and visualize and create my dashboarding, that can live in Docker or Linux. So pretty much all the different components of Flow to execute the model, that can be Dockerized and containerized. Unfortunately, at this point in time, the config tool is still a Windows thick client to configure. Yes.
All right. So when would an end user generally start using Flow? What maturity is needed?
That's a great question. Some of our best Flow customers are at the absolute crawl stage. Absolute crawl stage. 5 folks in a forklift in a garage. Why? Because of the simplicity of the tool, because they don't need to do much to get started, and they can get a report that drives insights that easy. Some of our most sophisticated customers aren't ever looking at Flow. It is all APIs, APIs, APIs. They're running 150 plants. They're running 350,000 KPIs. They can govern everything that's being processed across their entire organization from 1 or 2 locations. So we meet you where you are.
Okay.
I might want to add one thing to that. we like to see at least maybe an historian, all right? But we feel that with our offering of time-based that we can bridge that gap as well. There's some clients in the room that we've went through that journey from having no historian and having a very simple, at least an availability kind of dashboard up and running for them. So, but yes, when we talk to someone and they know at least what a time series historian can offer them, that's a good place for us to engage as well.
Yeah.
But as you saw from my presentation, if I need to manually provide information, we have that capability as well to do that.
All right. I think we've already answered the question of pricing, so we could take that off. Seek, we can take that off. Can you bring through event frames for OSI Pi?
When in my time at Canary, this was always the question that we would always get. Hey, I've got this Pi solution. I've spent so much of our life building in it. Can I just migrate this into Canary? Well, the reality is, of course you can't, because the way that any tool tries to solve a problem is fundamentally different than the other tool. With asset frameworks, the definition and all of the links and everything that you've done there, you would spend more time trying to take it, migrate it in, and fix all of the things that aren't going to work than just building out those templates inside of our tool and deploying them. So we don't ingest OSI Soft AF templates, and it's not because we don't like you, and it's not because we're trying to sell service hours. It's because you're better off to start fresh with the perspective of how our tool works than to try to import something you built specifically for another tool all over again.
All right. We got a little technical question here. Can you define deadbands for tags that you would want to trigger events off of? For example, if MQTT is giving me raw signals from the PLC, I need to smooth out the noise.
Yeah, we really didn't do a good job of demonstrating that, but we only had 30 minutes. So
because we getting that raw tag data in, one thing I didn't show is that I can actually perform calculations on that raw data. I can filter out a band, I can filter out bad quality, so we can look at the quality score for that tag, and I can filter out any non-good OPC quality codes. I can look at the previous value, maybe work out a rate of change, and if it's greater than something, drop it out, so not to trigger. So yes, we do have a calculation engine that does not just work on the aggregated data, it also works on the raw data, and I can build in these business rules to clean up that tag before I trigger an event. And we can do that calculation between different tags from different sources. So if I want to build a calculation based on the schedule data from the MES to say, only trigger when my schedule is active for this machine, I can include that tag from that additional data source in my calculation as well. So I can mix and match calculations from different data sources as well.
I guess we expected this from a 4.0 conference. Any plans to integrate AI?
Yeah, in fact, we are in the middle of some really exciting projects. There's going to be no announcements from Flow on new products from this stage. But in the next 90 days, there are going to be some really exciting announcements from Flow. And it is not going to be about some new AI technology that we've put on top of our product. Our philosophy is this. We are a plug-in architecture that is designed for you to bring best-in-class solutions that you like and tell us how to send all of the information that we have to, so that we are not holding you to our platform for things like AI and machine learning. We are not going to ever be the best place for machine learning and AI. We know that, right? That's not our specialty. We're going to stay in our lane, but we're going to make it really easy to connect our information to where you need it to go. So 90 days, we're going to announce some really neat things. It's not, look, Flow has AI. Sorry, but you'll like what we announce.
All right, well, looks like we're out of time, so if you guys want to see Jeff and Mark duke it out at the booth, I highly recommend you go there.
There's no argument. I'm just saying that's a whole long breadth conversation. Hey, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.